So it's official. JD Vance and Tim Walz will face off 1-1 guaranteed October 1st. That's in about 6 weeks from now. It is mid-August. We're going to see how this impacts the 2024 election and every little nuance as to whether or not their techniques against each other will land, what sort of fodder they will use, what kind of deck of cards are they really playing with, what kind of hand do they have, and if so, what kind of thing do they have? Okay, well, once we get there, we're going to answer how are they going to play it using their track record and facts. All right, let's go. So as of right now, we have a presidential race that is seemingly somewhat tied. Well, what do I mean? People on the left are saying Kamala is going to trounce Trump. Obviously, I get a lot of hate comments nowadays that say that, oh my God, you were so wrong. Truth is that I think Donald Trump is still likely to win. I give him 2 to 3 odds. I base that off the fact that Kamala, while being tied or slightly leading in the popular vote, is still likely to lose in the Electoral College. That's the way the cookie crumbles. In fact, if you look at Hillary Clinton, she beat Trump by millions of votes, over 2% of the popular vote. How did that work out for her? Look at Biden. He just barely won, obviously, with, he still needed to win about 5% of the popular vote to even beat Trump by the skin of his teeth or the few hairs on his head that were not transplanted in Turkey decades ago. That being said, let's look into what the polls are right now, because you might tell yourself, well, if you're in the lead in either candidacy, you might not want to do a debate, as a debate could be a fumbling. You don't necessarily need to risk it. Well, here's the thing. JD Vance is seemingly more desperate to debate Walz than vice versa. Well, why is that? We've seen a narrative recently espoused by the liberals that has been saying that, JD Vance, you were a weird guy, you are a pariah of sorts, and that you're certainly somebody who is not to be trusted with abortion rights and those things. So let's look into these attacks. So to address the attacks against JD Vance before we get into the video evidence as to how they argue against each other, let's look into what the allegations are to begin with. And we're going to predict them 6 weeks out, or almost 2 months. Truth is that we have an election that is going to be dependent on about 7 or so states. Basically, we're going to take Minnesota off the board. If Walz is good at anything, it's going to be to solidify that state, which already was going to go to Harris in my estimation and most people's. The point being, of course, is that we are looking at Walz probably alleging that Vance has these establishment ties, not to the Mitt Romneys, not to the John McCains. No, we're talking about specifically Peter Thiel, billionaires, Silicon Valley investors, early senior executives on the Facebook board, these types, the social network with Jesse Eisenberg. You get the motif. The point being, of course, is that these things will be brought up for sure. Biden, Walz, I even screwed up the thing. Wow, I am literally demented at 21 years old, but let's fix it right now. Okay, anybody with OCD, like the video, because I just saved you a bunch of pain right there. Okay, so here's Walz. So as I was saying, Walz is somebody who is probably somewhere between a Joe Biden politically and a Bernie Sanders. So he's definitely like 7/10 of the way to socialist. And what do I mean by that is that he's going to have these externalities that are pretty weird, and most candidates could say they're weird, like Mike Pence, but because JD has been tarred and feathered by the media, JD seemingly is on the back foot, hence why he's so desperate to debate. In fact, he's challenged Tim Walz to at least 1 or 2 other debates aside from the traditional one. Speaking of which, in tradition, presidential debates and VPs, namely, do not switch the result of the electoral election. Okay, it just doesn't do much of a difference. In fact, we look to 2012. Joe Biden schooled Paul Ryan. Did that change anybody's vote? No. It was just kind of cool to watch if you were of that persuasion. Nowadays, take it closer. 8 years ago, 2016, we saw Tim Kaine versus Mike Pence. A Snap poll showed that actually Mike Pence beat Tim Kaine 48% to 42% insofar as who did a better job against the other man. So that's a marginal difference, to be clear, and so it didn't play a vital factor into the election itself. That being said, we do have other factors that are pretty notable. So first and foremost, we do have other facts like polls that compare head to head who is more popular. Okay, so we have Tim Walz right here, and you'll notice that his approval rating is about +1. Okay, whereas JD's is -11. This is according to YouGov poll. Okay, this is pretty liberally slanted. Monmouth, again, not great results for JD either in this case, but here's the silver lining. About 14% of people in America, or let's say 15 to make it simple, 15% of Americans, or like 1 in 6, don't know who JD Vance is, which makes sense. About a quarter though, so about 40% more people don't know who Walz is. Now, that's usually a bad thing because the people that are in the party of the nominee tend to know about that guy first and not the other way around. So what it really means is that the people that are saying, oh, we like Walz better than Vance, that 10% gulf is actually going to be comprised mostly of right-leaning independents and conservatives outright. So when it comes down to the election cycle in October and whatnot in the fall, you feel the weather changing, the leaves change. Here in Arizona, we don't really have so many leaves. It's a mesquite tree that's always green, not the good kind. You'll notice facts such as this, that we do have people like Walz leading, but a lot of it is through ignorance. Okay, keep this in mind. To quickly address the 2020 election, when it comes to the vice presidential debates, Mike Pence, if you watch it, handled Kamala Harris pretty easily. Just that because he got the fly on his head, that basically erased everything, which tells you, like, God, isn't Kamala so lucky? Like, you run for vice president on the whim that maybe you'll become the nominee off some crazy chance, and it just so happens that you happen to be the VP for a guy who's the oldest president ever. So you actually became the nominee just without any votes or anything. But here we go. Anyhow, so yeah. JD Vance is totally under leverage when it comes to the polling, but I think it's somewhat of an oasis. Like I said, it's a sugar high by the Democrats. They're in the honeymoon, so to speak. It just seems as if, obviously, he's less popular than what you would want him to be if you're a Republican at all. But it's also to say that Walz is definitely going to drop in the approvals unless he wins the debate in October by a ton. So first and foremost, I spent hours watching the first and second debate performances from Walz in 2018 when he ran for governor of Minnesota, as well as his re-election effort 4 years later. I would say his debate skills are pretty mediocre. If he has a lead, then he'll definitely keep it, but he's susceptible to being to losing. He in Minnesota went against pretty standard, like 60-year-old white guys that were not really energizing the base in any means, and was just a bunch of milquetoast Republicans, okay? And so for him to have won those elections in a state that was already blue is not very impressive electorally. And so what I'm trying to say here is that he's pretty mid when it comes to debate performance. So let's look into JD, okay? So let's go.
He told a joke at a rally based on a false New York Times story, and Tim Ryan has decided to run his entire campaign on it. Now look, Tim Ryan is publicly out there on national television saying, I love Nancy Pelosi. A few months ago, he went before a national audience and said that he has to suck up and kiss up to Chuck Schumer. The guy who's subservient to the national party is Tim Ryan, who's been begging for these guys to come into this race and save him from the campaign that he's been running. So look, it's ridiculous for him to accuse me of being anything because he has utterly failed to be independent to represent this valley, and he'll utterly fail to represent the people of Ohio if he's
elected. Okay, you stuttered a little bit. Again, this was 2 years ago. Donald Trump has said recently, JD has gained his sea legs. What that means for people that are under the age of 50, and I had to learn this myself, is that you need to basically be rocked around before you get your footing on a boat. And so, definitely he's been getting better as a speaker in the past month. So imagine over 2 years ago. So keep that in mind.
People of Ohio, if he's elected to the United States Senate. This is obviously a clip that JD is running to try to misrepresent people. I ran against Nancy Pelosi, JD, for leadership. And you have to have the courage to take on your own leaders. These leaders in D.C. They will eat you up like a chew toy. Right?
Okay, so understand the dynamic here, okay? JD Vance is in Ohio that Trump has won both times, 2016 and 20. You are getting a headwind here. Now, it is a red wave midterm, presumably, at the time, is what they thought was going to happen. So JD's playing with the lead, basically. And so he's being cocky, and he's also saying, okay, your guy is Joe Biden, and he's unpopular in Ohio by, let's say, a more order of magnitude of like -15, okay? So you could say that, honestly, JD might do the same thing with Biden. He'll say, you know what, your current president right now sucks. And Harris is very unlikable. How would Walz defend against this? So let's use the analog from yesteryear and see what Ryan says.
I mean, you were calling Trump America's Hitler. Then you kissed his ass.
That's true.
It is true. And then you kissed his ass. And then he endorsed you. And you said he's the greatest president of all time.
Okay, so notice. JD has said inopportune things about Donald Trump in the past. Yes, like about 8 years ago, even 4 years ago, JD has said negative things about Donald Trump. Like, oh, he's America's Hitler, or Obama's such a smart guy. Stuff like that, stuff that doesn't really fly now. Truth is that this will definitely be a source of pain for JD, a vulnerability to be had that a lot of Republicans don't. And so, yes, expect this to be brought up by Tim Walz, but let's see how he defends this point.
Mitch McConnell gave you $40 million to prop up your campaign. Peter Thiel gave you $15 million. That's 50.
Again, Peter Thiel. Who's Peter Thiel? A Silicon Valley billionaire, conservative.
$5 million, JD. What do you think they want for that?
Okay, see the implications here. Now, the irony is obviously that Tim Ryan outspent JD by multiples, like 6-1, I think. And so, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to gaslight everybody with that notion. But anyway, let's look at another example right now.
Nancy Pelosi, JD, for leadership. And you have to have the courage to take on your own.
That he loves her. Is that the price of challenging Nancy Pelosi?
The quote of me saying, I love Nancy Pelosi, was right before I said I'm running against her. You know why? Because I don't have to hate anybody. I don't have to hate Republicans. I don't have to hate Nancy Pelosi or Joe. I don't have to hate them. We need to move the political discourse in this country from hate and anger and division to love and compassion and forgiveness and some grace. This great replacement theory was the motivator for the shooting.
So notice right here, he gets tarred by it's an attempted felony by JD saying, hey, you know what, you are on video or whatever saying you love Nancy Pelosi, somebody super unpopular, somebody who does not have populist bona fides by any degree. And then again, Biden by extension. How would Walz defend it? Again, oh, well, actually, kumbaya, I love everybody. So, you know, that sort of defense probably wouldn't work. But we'll see.
Buffalo, where that shooter had all these great replacement theory writings that J.D. Vance agrees with, some sicko got this information that he's peddling with, again, those extremists.
Okay, replace replacement theory and replace that with Project 2025 and the verbiage of Tim Walz, okay?
That he runs around with, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ted Cruz, all these guys, they just want to stoke this racial violence. We're tired of it, JD. This kid goes to a grocery store in Buffalo where black people shop and shoots them up. No, we want to move on from that. Everyone's exhausted. So I keep saying, I want to represent the exhausted majority. People that are tired of this stuff. Democrats, Republicans, and independents. We have a, hold on, JD.
No, this is disgusting. Here's exactly what happens when the media and people like Tim Ryan accuse me of engaging the great replacement theory. I'll tell you exactly what happens, Tim. What happens is that my own children, my biracial children, get attacked by scumbags online and in person because you are so desperate for political power that you'll accuse me, the father of 3 beautiful biracial babies, of engaging in racism. We are sick of it. You can believe in a border without being a racist. You can believe in the country without being a racist. And this just shows how desperate this guy is for political power.
Okay, that was a good defense. He hit all the notes. Granted, he didn't have charisma when he said it. Now, one thing I think he certainly did wrong in this circumstance was that he used the cudgel of, again, like, oh, you know what, actually, my kids are biracial, so therefore I'm not racist. That might actually piss some liberals off because they think it's duplicitous. I think it's a valid point, even though it's cringe to bring it up. And so, yeah, like if you didn't know, JD's married to an Indian lady called Usha. And so he has half Indian, half white children. 3 of them, he said. Yeah. So anyway, this defense is decent. Again, he's lacking a sort of charisma that Donald Trump has, or maybe we're just spoiled by Donald Trump being so charismatic, relatively speaking. But again, JD kind of lacking in that respect. Again, he's getting better over time as he talks to bigger crowds, but we'll see how that pans out. But let's see how Tim Walz addresses attacks against him. So sorry to tease you guys, but before we get into the stolen valor bit, let's actually get to where Tim Walz basically gets announced as the nominee and right off the bat starts attacking JD Vance. Now, there's been a coordinated smear campaign by the liberals. I'm assuming, I can only predict that it's because they all at the same time started using the term weird. Like, oh, you're just plain weird, which you might think is like some sort of Disney Channel roast, but it turns out to be what they're using nowadays, along with Brad and the coconut tree and all these other things that are somewhat weird. And I'm only young enough to barely understand what it means, but let's see what Tim Walz has to say to JD Vance. Again, this is about the vice presidency, okay? Pretty big deal.
JD Vance literally wrote the foreword for the architect of the Project 2025 agenda.
Okay, that's a good diss because obviously Project 2025 is about as unpopular as is like pro-life, and pro-life is about a 60-40 losing proposition politically. Again, not the way things ought to be, but it is what it is. Okay, so
like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on. That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy.
Okay, so here's the thing. He is charismatic more so than JD. No doubt about it. And again, I'm conservative, I'm biased. But the truth is that he's also he's almost hamming it up too much, if you know what I mean. Now, again, this could be a familiarization thing. He can get acclimatized to the situation. He might actually chill it out a little bit, so he's not coming off like, oh my God, dude, are you overacting, so to speak? But he's totally overdoing it here, low key. This might come off as like overt concern trolling is the way to say it. Also, you know, I do get some people say like, oh, I'm not professional enough, but it is kind of true that he kind of looks like I would say Joe Biden mixed with John McCain mixed with Bernie Sanders and gained 30 pounds. Do you not see it? Also, keep in mind, both of these people on stage are both like 60 years old each. Okay, Kamala looks 15 years younger at least. I'll give her that.
That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So,
My camera's bugging out like crazy. Sorry.
you see what I did there? Look. I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
Okay, see, he's speaking to the choir, literally, like everybody's applauding what they're saying, obviously. But will this fly in a debate stage? Do you think he could actually, gesticulate? And it's very flamboyant. You would think he's trying to copy me with the hand movements, but he's totally out of line with this sort of talking. I don't know what else to say. I mean, trying to say that in a place that has no audience, for example, would be really weird. Or also, if you were to say it in front of an audience that isn't completely Democrat, people are going to just not clap all the time. And he's going to be like, what the fuck? He's like, oh my God, they're just plain weird, guys. And it's like, that only works if you're at a MAGA rally, if you're in a Democrat rally. But if you don't have full consensus, you just come off awkward. Okay, let's play that one more time.
You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
Now, the problem with being so incredulous with that sort of attack that's just saying oh, you're weird. First of all, it's a very low level of argument. I mean, it's kind of like if you're a Republican, you're like, oh, this person has colored hair. Oh my God, they're gay. Oh my God. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. If you're talking to another person that agrees with you, yes, that's funny. But obviously, if you're trying to convince people, which is the name of the game, then it's not going to work out for you so well.
So you know what's out there, so say it with me. We aren't going back. We aren't going back. We are not going back.
Okay, so that's them skinwalking as Obama. We ain't going back. Okay, Jesus. Alrighty, folks. So this is going to be addressing the stolen valor attack. JD Vance is a veteran of the Marines. Again, he didn't fight in combat, but he actually deployed and was in the desert for a while. Whereas Tim Walz has a complicated record. He served about 24 years in the reserves in Minnesota, but when it came to actually coming and deploying to Iraq, the timing of his retirement was all the more conspicuous. Plus, obviously, when you look at it, he apparently, right before he was supposed to deploy, kind of quit, and then he kind of came back before the 2 years of some sort of technicality elapsed so that he could come back and keep his rank, but he still lost it. So some awkward stuff like that. People that were his cohorts, people that served with him, did go and fight in Iraq, whereas he did not. But he's going to assume, I guess, that isn't the case or something. So obviously, veteran to veteran, he's saying, you know what, dude, as in JD Vance, Walz is definitely a liar. Now, how will Walz defend against this? This will certainly come up in the debate stage.
With my dad's encouragement, a guy who served in the Army during the Korean War, I signed up for the Army National Guard 2 days after my 17th birthday. I served for the next 24 years for the same reason all my brothers and sisters in uniform do. We love this country. Then in 2005, I felt the call of duty again, this time of being service to my country in the halls of Congress. My students inspired me to run for that office, and I was proud to make it to Washington. I was a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee and a champion of our men and women in uniform.
Okay, see, this does not work. It only appeals to the people that already want to vote for you, Tim, because the argument and the accusation is around the years 2001 and 2004, not the years 2005 and so on. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like if you're talking about a criminal record and you're like, well, actually, conveniently, in the time where I was supposed to be in prison, I'm not going to mention that, but, I was a youth pastor afterwards. It's like, no, wait, hold on a second. What are we missing out? So this is not a thorough enough answer.
I'm going to say it again as clearly as I can. I am damn proud of my service to this country.
That was a delayed clap. That was really bad. That was really bad.
And I firmly believe you should never denigrate another person's service record. To anyone brave enough to put on that uniform for our great country, including my opponent, I just have a few simple words. Thank you for your service and sacrifice.
That did not work, bro. Who let him cook? All right, so in all seriousness, guys, that defense of what seems to be the biggest glaring issue with Tim Walz's candidacy was not defended well. You gave him over a minute. I did. Let him play it out. Okay. Did you defend yourself on these charges? No, you didn't. You sidestepped, you obfuscated, and then you, again, moral concern trolling, trying to have the moral high ground by saying, you know what, actually, I would never denigrate another service member, which the implication would be that they actually serve to their full capacity and not necessarily opportunistically bow out when you're about to be deployed in Afghanistan or Iraq, like your cohort said, like the people that you served with in the same group did. But in fact, you step aside and then all of a sudden you run for Congress instead. Again, what is the priority there? And it's not to say, well, you know what, these other 20 years that you put into the reserves is worthless. In fact, I don't even care. Millions of other people have done the same thing, and they don't get this lauded credit necessarily, because it's not about necessarily, oh, you were in the military. It's about, did you do what you were asked to? And so, like, if you avoided the war, then just say you avoided the war. For example, Donald Trump, this might come up in the debate as well. You faked bone spurs allegedly to avoid the Vietnam War. That could be true. We don't know. Benefit of the doubt, well, maybe he did have foot problems. A lot of people do. But obviously, it seems convenient. You're a rich kid. Obviously, you want to miss out on a war that a lot of people would say was pointless at the time. So you could see why he dodged that war, but he's not getting any accolades for serving in the military. And then you could retort back and say, well, yeah, but Tim Walz was in the reserves. Okay, doing what? And so he has a habit of stretching the truth. Well, what do I mean? Again, JD would know more than I, but he's 20 years older, so you would assume so. When it comes down to it, Walz opportunistically, time and again, over decades, has been saying while running for Congress or governor that he has been, carrying arms into war. The implication being he's been shooting jihadis or something, when in fact he was in Italy. Now, he said, oh, I was a veteran of Enduring Freedom or whatever the campaign was back then in the military for Iraq. Okay, but so that's a facetious thing to say. Why? Because yes, technically, if you're over here servicing the planes or helping out the logistics in Italy for the guys that are serving in Baghdad, okay, yeah, you have a tangential relationship that benefits that campaign, but you could say the same thing about anybody that's deployed in Langford or anybody that's deployed in Arizona or Florida, people that are repairing ships, that are repairing tanks, that are eventually sent back to the Middle East. I mean, to say like, oh, well, I was in Italy. Okay, so what? So like you had a cannoli and you got shot at? No, you didn't. And so again, stretching the truth. He's a politician. Are we surprised? It's actually super facetious. I mean, come on. Alrighty, folks. So this debate will come down to a couple of different aspects. It's going to be, what are the weaknesses of the candidates and what are the strengths? Now, I forgot to cover this aspect, okay? I don't edit my videos, but look at this. Among debate watchers of the October 10th debate between Vance and Ryan, which I think we saw earlier on the channel, you'll notice that 45% of people in the poll said that Vance did better than they expected, whereas only 35% said that Ryan met their expectation. So this debate, obviously in Ohio, did not make the deal breaker difference, nor did it really swap the vote out too much. But again, Vance did handedly beat Ryan in that debate, and that was 2 years ago when he was chunkier and just not as smart rhetorically, okay? He was just not as charismatic as he is now. Not saying he's that good either. I'd say as a speaker, when he was running for Senate, he was probably like a 4. Now he's at like a 6. Again, it's not so much can you speak sentences because he's good at that. It's about connoting emotion and a tonality that would keep people engaged when you're speaking. Walz has more of that than Vance does naturally, but Walz is also more disconcerting. Now you could say, well, but Vance is the weirdo, which brings me to their weaknesses, okay? Vance, again, has been labeled as like, okay, you're weird, you're more tied into Project 2025 than Trump even is, and that's something that they beat the Republicans over with, a cudgel-like, because of pro-life stuff and IVF stuff and all sorts of things. And so Vance, defending himself, again, he has the defense for the racism charge by saying that he's married to an Indian. That's pretty bulletproof. When it comes to you're just plain weird, I mean, I doubt Walz will say something about a couch. Okay, that'd be super unprofessional. And so I don't know what Walz would say there. When it comes down to Walz, on the other hand, what are his weaknesses? Again, stolen valor. He has yet to come up with a defense that makes sense for that. He basically just says it's none of your business, or soldiers should never rag on other soldiers, which, you know what, actually, if that's true, then the dozens of soldiers in Vietnam that took advantage of those women and the rice farms and whatever, I guess those also shouldn't be denigrated either. Oh, wait, no. Okay, so you see? So anyway, inconsistencies aside, I think people that are watching the debate live will see that if he's stupid enough to use that defense. Anyway, so who would win the debate? Again, I'm super long-winded. We're about 25 minutes in. I'll tell you what, I think that actually Vance will win the debate about 6-4. Well, what do I mean? Both of these guys are not universally liked. They're not also universally hated. I think that both of the camps, and the way I conceptualize it in my head is that you've got, let's say, 45% of Republicans, 45% of Democrats. That's about 90% of the viewers, and then 10% down the middle. You know, whoever wins the debate actually wins their vote, or at least that's how they're leaning after it. Okay, for there to be a landslide win, one would have to crap their pants, literally. What do I mean? Donald Trump won the debate against Joe Biden by 2/3, even though obviously the other guy wasn't even playing the same game. Okay, so like realistically, that debate should have been like a 90-10 split, but it was like 60-30 because of polarization. So even if Walz loses objectively, like a lot of other people do, it turns out that he would probably still have like 42% of people saying that he won the debate, and JD like at a 58 or something. Which, you know what, would it move the needle? The answer is actually not at all. Okay, now I might have strung you along this whole video saying like, oh my god, it would matter, and it kind of does, but not really. It's the VP after all. Now, like the video if you like that, and let me add how my election prediction is impacted if the debate goes awry or good for JD. So first and foremost, my prediction as it stands right now is something along the lines of this, with Trump barely eking it out of Michigan. But anyway, 312 to 226. Now, if Vance wins the debate, I think this is the exact same map. Really, nothing changes. Now, if Vance loses the debate, let's say 60-40 to Walz, I personally think that Walz would probably maybe make Michigan, again, this would hurt Trump maybe like 0.03% or something, very, very tiny result difference, but that'd be the amount. So enough stuttering aside, there you go. Like the video if you'd liked it. Again, I'm uploading this while I'm in vacation in Mexico, Cia Cortez. I'll pre-record, I think, 4 videos each for the one per day that I'm gone. So I'll see y'all on the other side of that. Thank you. Adios.